Oh, thanks, Sarah. Good morning. It is good to see you all here. If you are in the building, we're glad that you made it through the giant snowstorm that was happening a little bit ago that I was maybe crying about just a little bit. It's fine. It's fine. If you are online, we're glad you are here with us as well. It is good to be together in whatever form that can be in this space and in this community. We're going to start with just a couple of announcements, things that are coming up that you need to be aware of. Tonight is branch students. It's their regular Sunday evening gathering. Grades 6 through 12, all of them meet all together for a meal and games, and then there's breakout groups for the different ages for some conversations and connections. It's always a fun time. There was a scavenger hunt a couple of weeks ago, and I got a text about somebody nearly breaking their leg. So I don't know. There's hilarity and there's chaos that happens. So it's great fun. If you have never been to branch students before and you're like, I don't know if I should go if I've not been, come. I promise there will be friendly faces. The leaders will be more than happy to welcome you and to get you plugged into that group. So that's tonight at 6:00 right here. And then this Tuesday, you may have seen a flyer out in the cafe about an event that is not here. It's just an event in the community that we were made aware of this week. It's an author by the name of Ben McBride, and he is going to have a conversation about what we do about these issues of injustice. And how we maybe approach that conversation and approach that work. And his big question is, what do I need to be like as we approach those conversations? So if that's something you're interested in, it is free. You do have to sign up. That info is in your announcement sheet, as well as on a QR code out in the cafe. So more information about the author and the event, all out there. Okay. And then next week, Sunday, yes, the 24th, yep. Next week, Sunday, Chris is going to host another conversation with an update about Israel and Palestine, talking a lot about his trip recently. If people came to the one last week, should they, can they, will it be different, will they come again? You should come again. Yes. So similar to the conversation that was largely on Zoom last week, but also some new things, new questions will come up with new faces. So you are welcome to come again. Or if you haven't been to the first one, you are absolutely welcome to engage in that. At Chris and Bethany's home, there will be a Zoom option available if you can't make it in person as well. Okay? All right. Sarah is going to come up and read for us. What she's going to read is somewhat familiar. Oh, I tried. I'm so sorry. I almost did it. It is the story of the Beatitudes. So those of you who have grown up in the church or been in the church for any amount of time will likely recognize the Beatitudes. Sarah's going to read it from a First Nations version of the Bible. It is relatively new, and it is an indigenous reading and telling of the New Testament. So Sarah's going to read that. We're going to engage with Beatitudes in multiple ways this morning. So she's going to read it, and then we're going to sing it together, and then we'll do some other things with it as well. Thanks, Sarah.
Good morning. Blessings of the good road. Creator's blessing rests on the poor, the ones with broken spirits. The good road from above is theirs to walk. Creator's blessing rests on the one who walk a trail of tears, for he will wipe the tears from their eyes and comfort them. Creator's blessing rests on the one who walks softly and in a humble manner. The earth, land, and sky will welcome them and always be their home. Creator's blessing rests on the ones who hunger and thirst for wrongs to be made right again. They will eat and drink until they are full. Creator's blessings rest on the ones who are merciful and kind to others. Their kindness will find its way back to them, full circle. Creator's blessing rests on the pure of heart. They are the ones who will see the Great Spirit. Creator's blessing rests on the ones who make peace. It will be said of them, they are the children of the Great Spirit. Creator's blessing rests on the ones who are hunted down and mistreated for doing what is right, for they are walking the good road from above. Others will lie about you, speak against you, and look down on you with scorn and contempt, all because you walk the road with me. This is a sign that Creator's blessing is resting on you. So let your hearts be glad and jump for joy, for you will be honored in the spirit world above. You are like the prophets of old who were treated in the same way by your ancestors.
Thank you, Sarah. I invite all of us to stand and to sing the maybe more familiar words of the Beatitudes with the song, "The Kingdom is Yours." Would you stand and sing with me? Blessed are the ones who do not bury all the broken pieces of their heart. Blessed are the tears of all the weary, pouring like a sky of falling stars. Blessed are the wounded ones in mourning, brave enough to show the Lord their scars. Blessed are the hurts that are not hidden, open to the healing touch of God. The kingdom is yours. The kingdom is yours. Hold on a little more. This is not the end. Hope is in the Lord. Keep your eyes on Him. Blessed are the ones who walk in kindness, even in the face of great abuse. Blessed are the deeds that go unnoticed, serving with unguarded gratitude. Blessed are the ones who fight for justice, justice, longing for the coming day of peace. Blessed is the soul that thirsts for righteousness, welcoming the last, the lost of the east. The kingdom is yours. The kingdom is yours. Hold on a little more. This is not the end. Hope is in the Lord. Keep your eyes on Him. The kingdom is yours. The kingdom is yours. Hold on a little more. This is not the end. Hope is in the Lord. Keep your eyes on Him. Blessed are the ones who suffer violence and still have strength to love their enemies. Blessed is the faith of those who persevere. Though they fall, they'll never taste defeat. The kingdom is yours. The kingdom is yours. Hold on a little more. This is not the end. Hope is in the Lord. Keep your eyes on Him. You can have a seat. Nearby on your seats, you should find a piece of paper that is what Sarah read for us this morning. This is the First Nations version of the Beatitudes called The Blessings of the Good Road. If there's not one nearby, there are a few extra in rows near you if you would like more than one or two copies there. We're going to take a few minutes to just sit with those words this morning. You're invited to read through that one more time. Read it slowly and carefully and see what you notice. Simply pay attention. Notice if your body changes in some way if you are reading a certain line or phrase. Notice if some emotion rises up as you read a certain word or phrase. And when you notice that, just sit with that. Sit with that phrase, sit with that word. Maybe it's one of those paragraphs. Just sit with it for a few minutes and see what comes. Notice what is going on in your body, in your mind, in your heart. We're going to take a few minutes, so you have plenty of time to do this. You can even do this if you have people nearby. You can do this in a group as well if you want to talk about it instead of just reading it on your own. I'm going to keep playing for a little bit and give you all some time and space to do that, and then we'll close that time together by singing the chorus that we just sang together one more time. The kingdom is yours. The kingdom is yours. Hold on a little more. This is not the end. Hope is in the Lord. Keep your eyes on Him. Hold on a little more. This is not the end. Hope is in the Lord. Keep your eyes on Him. We'll keep engaging the Beatitudes this morning, and you are welcome to continue that thoughtful exercise in reading as you go home today as well. We'll have another chance to engage with it a little bit later this morning as well. If you are 4 years old through 4th grade, you can head to the back. Wait there. We're going to speak a blessing on you as you leave. But Branch kids will go downstairs and have some fun on their own. As you go, will the rest of you all stand and speak this blessing that we speak upon our kids every time they walk out? If you would like, you can put a hand out to extend that blessing of love. And you all are going to have to just take it because I can't see the screen. So ready, set, go. You are loved. Have a great time, kiddos. We'll see you in a little while. The rest of you can stay standing or stand back up and greet one another. Go find somebody who you haven't seen for a while or you might not know this morning.
All right, everybody, how about if we grab a seat? We'll continue on here this morning. Welcome if you're online. Glad that you're with us through that means. Good to see you as much as we can imagine seeing you. Happy St. Patrick's Day. I had no idea, which is why my dear nephew, in short, I would not be pinched today. He asked me where tape was, and I said, I'm not going to tell you where tape is unless you tell me why you're going to go get it. And he said, I'm saving you. And I was like, bless you. Sweet one, bless you. So happy St. Patrick's Day today. I want to read this passage that we've now kind of engaged with a couple of times. This is from a more perhaps familiar version, so its rhythm and pattern might feel, again, more familiar to you. This is Matthew 5, starting in verse 3. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. God blesses you when people mock you and persecute you and lie about you and say all sorts of evil things about you because you are my followers. Be happy about it. Be very glad, for a great reward awaits you in heaven. And remember, the ancient prophets were persecuted in the same way. Jesus taught the crowds with these words, and when he did, he was speaking to a group of people who knew all too well what it meant to be a victim. The people in Judea and the surrounding areas were people who lived under an oppressive tax system, as an example. A tax system so oppressive that it really eliminated any chance of economic freedom for the average person. They had their freedom stifled, of course, because they were a people under occupation, an occupation carried out by the most powerful empire on the planet at the time. And even some of their own religious leaders, not all of them, but some of them used their power to put unrealistic and even harmful religious rules on them. The people that Jesus is talking to knew what it meant to be a victim. This is how the dictionary defines it: a person harmed, injured, or even killed as a result of a crime, accident, or other event or action. And when you pause and consider the stories that we've been talking about here during Lent, I think one thing that you can begin to see is that these stories that often take hold of us easily create victims, people who are harmed or injured or even killed. The domination story creates victims through misused and abused power. The revolution story, of course, creates cycles of victims, and victims then becoming the victimizers. The purification story, which is a story in which I believe that me or my group is better than you or your group, creates victims because of arrogance. And the isolation story creates victims, people who are harmed because of various separations and divisions that we create between us. Victims seem to be a common consequence of these stories. And since these stories are at work all around us every day, it means chances are good, I suspect, that to varying degrees, each of us know what it is to be a victim. Which is to say, each of us know what it is to be harmed by another, to be injured by another. We've all been dominated, again, to varying degrees and in different ways. We've all been on the receiving end of revenge. We've all been told in some way that we don't belong. We've all felt the pain of separation and distance. And today we're talking about a fifth story, a story in which the pain and the harm that we experience in this life can consume us. McLaren and Higgins, these two people who we've been leaning into for this series, they label this the story of victimization. And you probably remember, if you've been here the last few weeks, that we've sometimes read from a children's book that they wrote to try and help communicate the ideas behind these stories. And this is how they communicate this story of victimization. It says in this children's book, 6 old stories everywhere we go. The same 6 stories are running the show, and then this is the 5th story here, of being stuck in self-pity for the pain we've been through. The idea behind this story of victimization is that sometimes we get stuck in our pain. And we can even get stuck in such a way that the harm inflicted upon us can become central to our identity. Our pain becomes who we are to a degree. This happens pretty easily, even in our own lives. And it's happened certainly kind of on the world stage in ways that are big and dramatic. I just started reading a book on the history of the apartheid of South Africa. I grew up, because of my age, just at a time when I really wasn't paying attention to world events. And so apartheid I knew about, but I don't know much of it in its detail. I'm curious about it because it's one of these examples in history where human beings managed to overturn an oppressive form of government, in this case, a system that was harming and creating a lot of victims. People managed to overturn it, even though as a system it seemed immovable and unstoppable. And I'm curious about that. How does that happen? We have examples of this in history. That would be one. The civil rights movement would be perhaps one in our own country. I'm curious how it happens, partly because of, I think, my work with Israel-Palestine, and that feels like an oppressive, immovable system in place, and you just can't imagine a way forward. But this happens in world history, and if you don't know much about apartheid, here's a little bit of context. Apartheid started in 1948 and didn't end until 1990. That's a long time. Generations lived under apartheid, and apartheid was a system of government. It was a legal system in South Africa to ensure that one group of people dominated, had everything, and another group of people did not. And in that 40 or so years of this apartheid, thousands of people were harmed. Tens of thousands, actually. Hundreds, if not thousands, the number's a little hard to nail down, were killed under this really brutal and oppressive system. And if I think about what it would be like to live under an oppressive system in which every part of my life was managed and harmed, and then finally that system was overturned, and I imagine myself in that moment, you know what I would at least be tempted to do? I'd be tempted to turn the tables, right? Because what happened in South Africa is that this legal system, this government was overturned, and a new government was established that had equal representation of everyone who lived in South Africa. All people now were able to access the same things, and all these barriers were broken down. And if I suddenly found myself in power, I'd be really tempted to exact some revenge, right? That's obviously the revenge story that we talked about a few weeks ago. What this government decided to do is pretty remarkable. They formed what were called Truth and Reconciliation Commissions. Okay? They formed 3 committees. One that looked at the human rights violation of apartheid. Where were people's human rights violated? And those stories were brought forward and told in a court-like setting. Then there was a committee that was responsible for reparations and rehabilitation. So one committee listened to all of the harm caused. The other then tried to decide how might those harms be rectified? How might that person who was injured be rehabilitated? And then the third committee, interestingly, had the permission to grant amnesty to those who caused harm. If you were someone who had been in power during apartheid, you could come, and there were very clear and strict provisions in this committee, but they could grant you amnesty from what you did. By no means was this system perfect, and lots of people like to criticize it for its imperfections. Part of the imperfection is that in order for this system to work, you have to have both the one harmed and the one who caused the harm come together. And in South Africa's experience, I think 7,000 people came forward, and only about 1,500 people who had caused harm came forward looking for amnesty. So there wasn't quite an equality in that sense. So it wasn't perfect. But here was an attempt. I'm telling you all of this to say, here was an attempt when victims had been created in brutal circumstances, and they had now power and could have done with that power really whatever they wanted. They chose to try and find a way to work through the pain. To work through the pain. And that's not what we typically do. Both in big examples and also in our own individual lives, I don't think. Politicians actually, I'll just say this really briefly because we should be paying attention to this as we're in this election cycle. Politicians of all stripes love to exploit pain. Oh, you've been hurt. You feel your power's being taken away. You're losing your place in society. The laws being passed you feel are unfair against you. Elect me, and I will use my power for you. This is a very common tactic. Pay attention. You'll notice it here in the coming months. South Africa tried to go a different way. They tried to work through the pain. Instead of having the pain define, and this is what South Africans could have chosen, those who had been on the receiving end of all of this brutality, they could have chosen to let that pain define them. This is who I am. I'm a victim of apartheid. I'll never be anything else. It's my story. Or they could have, again, reacted violently to try and seek revenge. I know for me, this is a really hard thing to do, to work through my pain when someone has harmed me. I tend to respond in the way of my ancestors. My ancestors generally, I think, believed that it was best to repress strong emotions, including pain. And I can't blame all my ancestors, but I do come out of a heritage, a Dutch heritage, in case you didn't know, by my last name, where we don't talk about things that are difficult. My knee-jerk reaction when I've been wronged, whether I've stubbed my toe or someone has hurt me, is to say I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. This is very hard for me, but it's one of the common reactions, I think, when we've been harmed, is that we push down our pain, right? We try to minimize it. Oh, it wasn't that big of a deal, or the person really didn't mean it, or I'm fine. But I think what we're learning kind of collectively, culturally at this moment as we become more intelligent around our emotional life is that if you repress an emotion, if you repress pain, you try to push it down, it does not make it go away. It just festers. And it will come out. That pain will show up somehow in some way, and almost guaranteed it will not show up in a way that's healthy. But this is a very common way of handling our pain, and the other is to explode outwardly with it, right? Our pain becomes the fuel that leads to more harm. Neither of these two responses, if you couldn't already kind of sense it, they do not lead to the kind of life that God desires for us. And so instead of pushing it down or exploding out, we have to find safe and healthy ways to let out our pain and our hurt and even our anger and our fury. Because we will be angry when we've been hurt. We will. Watch children interact with each other. They don't have the same filters that we do. And when someone harms them, they usually express anger at the injustice, at the harm. They express sadness. And sometimes it's very strong. Yes, those of you who have been around children, it's a very strong reaction, as it should be. As it at least, maybe not should be, but as we, I think, should expect it to be. If you are a human being and someone has harmed you, you are going to feel that deeply and strongly. I think one of the mistakes that we make is we tell each other that we shouldn't feel that. You shouldn't be so angry. You should calm down. You're over-exaggerating. And I don't know that we do each other any favors when we say that to each other. I think a better thing to do if we're trying to walk with each other when one of us has been harmed by another, maybe a better thing to say to each other is, I will sit here with you in the ashes. I'm just going to be here with you. Feel what you need to feel. Say what you need to say. Right? Sometimes we can be that gift to each other. We can provide that kind of safe space for this other person to name what it is that they're feeling, what it is that they've experienced. Sometimes we need a professional, though. Sometimes the pain is so significant and deep that we really need a trained, skilled individual who can create a container for us, who can hold space for us to do and say whatever we need to do and say. In the podcast, if you're following along, there's a podcast that is connected to these 7 stories. And in this episode related to the story of victimization, Garrett Higgins talks about going to his therapist for the first time and walking into the room and being surprised. Because in this room was a punching bag and a pile of stuffed animals and a stack of phone books. Everybody in here old enough to remember what a phone book is? Most of you. Your parents can explain it if you don't know. And then a few mattresses leaning against the wall. And Garrett was like, what is this all? And he's like, well, sometimes people when they come in and they're bringing pain and hurt and all of the emotions connected to it, they need to just hit something. Sometimes they need to squeeze a teddy bear. Or he said sometimes they tear the head off. Because it would be better, safer, to tear the head of a stuffed animal off than the head of a person who's harmed you, of course. Sometimes they need to get their anger out by ripping a telephone book. And then the therapist said, and if they've done any of those things, if they've done any of that work, then they probably need to lie down for a while, which is why the mattresses are here. I think it's a really helpful illustration of just some ideas for how we might engage our pain in ways that are healthy and safe and do not cause more harm to ourselves or to another. Because we probably need some imaginative ways of doing this if you're like me at least and you did not grow up in an environment where you learned, no knock on my parents, they weren't given the skills either, but I did not grow up learning how to express hurt and pain in ways that were healthy and not vindictive and vengeful. And I think this little example that Garrett shares is helpful to us in that. He goes on to say that healthy spirituality has room for anger about our own suffering. We can validate our suffering without making an idol out of it, or without pushing it down, or without letting it explode outward. Healthy spirituality has room for anger and fury and disgust and disappointment and sadness and whatever other emotions might be attached to it. But we don't need to make an idol out of our suffering, or we don't need to repress it or let it move us towards vengeance. We can work through our pain. It's probably going to take somebody else with us. If it's any significant pain, it's probably going to take us having someone with us. But if we can move through our pain, if we can work through it, if we can acknowledge it and have safe spaces to process it, then it's even possible to be changed for the better as we go through that. So it might be worth just checking in for a moment, like, do you notice in yourself this morning, or if you were to pause here for a moment, do you notice that you have any anger or fury or deep sadness or whatever emotion might be there because you've been harmed? And is there work to be done? We all have work to do at different points in our lives around this, because we all get hurt, right? And if you're in that place right now where you have been wounded, or you're carrying a wound from long ago, are there healthy ways for you? Are there safe people for you with whom you can process that pain? This is the 5th story we're looking at. One more next week, the story of accumulation, and then Easter, the 7th story. These stories are everywhere. They're part of the human experience. They're all around us. Here's the thing, though. They usually operate under the surface of our awareness. We're not consciously aware that these stories are at work. And that's when they're dangerous, right? If we're not aware of the ways in which these stories are at work in our lives, then they have the ability to take over. And I think one of the points of talking about these stories is to get them on our radar, to bring them to our awareness, so that when they do show up in our lives or in the lives of the people whom we love, we can have eyes to see them. And then if we do, we can choose how we want to respond. When the story of domination is working on autopilot under the surface, then we're likely to not make a purposeful choice about how we respond to it. It's just going to carry us along. But if we have an awareness about it, oh, this is the story of domination, I can see it, then we have perhaps a choice. We have the ability to choose. So, this is yet another story to try and pay attention to. Is it at play in our life right now? Is it at play in the life of someone we love? If the answer is no to either of those, it will show up at some point here. And so can we have a heightened awareness around it? And then choose to respond in a way that helps us move through the pain, acknowledging it, validating it, not telling people or ourselves that we shouldn't feel a certain way around it, but giving ourselves and each other permission and space to process and to work through it. We're going to respond this morning in a few different ways, and I'll share those in a moment. But I want to just kind of close this sermon before we get to those ways of responding by reading again the Beatitudes. Because as I said a moment ago, the people that Jesus is talking to know what it is to be harmed by another. And Jesus seems to say that those people who have been hurt and injured and wounded by another person are actually the ones who are blessed. Now that word blessing gets all mixed up because for lots of reasons we might think that blessing means private jets, mansions, that this is what Jesus is saying. Hey, if this has happened to you, blessings are coming your way in the form of material blessings, or maybe in the form of a life without any problems, or a life of fame, or whatever. That's obviously, well, maybe not obviously. Let's just say together, that is not what Jesus means when he says blessed. He's talking about something else. That it's these people whom God pays attention to, notices, is close to, responds to. It's not necessarily the powerful or the ones with position. It's these folks. So I'm going to read through this one more time and just make a couple of notes as we go through the Beatitudes here, and then we'll have some chances to respond this morning. This is Matthew 5 again, starting in verse 3. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Interestingly, Luke's gospel, which has these same Beatitudes, says, blessed are the poor. It stops there. For theirs is the kingdom of heaven. I think Eugene Peterson translates it, blessed are those who are at the end of their rope. I like that. That's helpful language for me. For theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. People mourn, of course, when they've lost someone or something of great value. Sometimes we lose those things at the hands of domination or revenge or even the purification story. Jesus said, blessed are those, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek. The meek are those who are humble and generous, not seeing themselves as better than the other or separate from the other. The stories of purification and isolation. Now, blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, those who see the ways in which domination and revenge and isolation make the world unjust. And they commit to finding ways to repair and heal. Blessed are those people, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, those who are not responding to harm with a desire to harm, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, not those who exploit or manipulate or use power to harm. Blessed are those who are pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, those who live according to a different story, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, who are persecuted because they live a life of pursuing justice, wholeness, shalom, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. God blesses you when people mock you or persecute you and lie about you and say all sorts of evil things against you because you are my followers. Rejoice and be glad, for a great reward awaits you in heaven. And remember, the ancient prophets were persecuted in the same way. Amen. So here's some ways to respond this morning. One way would be to just continue to reflect on the Beatitudes. You've got that printout. You likely have a phone, which gives you access to any Bible translation you could imagine. Maybe you want to read it in a different translation. And in the next few minutes, to just continue to ruminate and ask yourself, what is this passage saying to me this morning? Another option might be to acknowledge your emotions or your experience. I will say this, a public gathering like this that we're doing right now is not set up to hold space for us to process our deepest pain. Does that make sense, right? Yet, perhaps for some of us, it might be helpful to reflect this morning, to sit with this morning our emotional life and to ask ourselves, what am I carrying today? Am I carrying any of the things that are related to the hurt and the harm? And have I been repressing them or not paying attention to them? And what I would be helped to do today would be to name it, to put it on a piece of paper. If you do this, you could hang on to that piece of paper. You also could just bring it up and set it here on the table as a way of surrendering it, as offering where you are. Maybe as you do that, or even before you do that, you know that it might be helpful to have someone pray with you. Because, again, we need each other. And so Teresa and I will be in the back here in that space just behind the sanctuary. And if you would like someone to talk to, or someone to pray with you or for you, we would be happy to do that in these next few minutes. And then communion. Inviting you today to come to this table, which, this table tells us a lot about pain and harm inflicted on someone unjustly. And it also tells us something about that person's response. Jesus is in the Garden of Gethsemane before he's arrested, and he is being very honest about how he feels, if you remember that story. And so all of that is captured here, and you are welcome to come to the table today and to take a piece of bread and to take a thing of juice or a gluten-free cracker, and to take them back to your seat and to eat and drink them on your own. We won't eat them collectively this morning. This would just be a chance for you to come up here anytime in the next few minutes, take these back to your seat, and eat and drink them, remembering this example of Christ. And so those are some options for us this morning over the next number of minutes. If you're at home, all of these are available to you as well, minus the praying with you, although if you shoot Teresa or myself a text, we would be more than happy to connect with you this week, or maybe even right now we might have the chance. If you would like that, we'd be happy to just have a conversation and to share in whatever's on your heart. So again, plenty of time here to move through these different pieces as we like, and then after that we will have one more song that we're going to sing together. So let's do our best to be open and to pay attention to what God may want to say to us. And I'll just offer a brief prayer here to begin our time, and then after that you're welcome to move about. God, we believe, and help us in our unbelief. We believe that you are with us always, that you know what is true in our lives. You are aware of what we are carrying, including the ways in which we have been harmed. Would you do what you promised to do in the Beatitudes? Would you comfort us today and help us to bring comfort to other people, even in these next few moments? Meet us here, we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Friends, if you haven't had a chance to come to the table and to take communion and you would like to, you're welcome to do that now or in the next song. If you haven't eaten or drank your cup, you are welcome to do that now as reminder of God's great love and of the different way that Jesus offers us. There's a basket coming through with cups as well. That's the goal of all of these stories. If we pay attention to where these stories show up, then we can choose a different way, right? We can choose the way of Jesus. Spoiler alert, that's the Easter story coming here. That's the seventh story. It's the way of Jesus. And that is, as Chris was reading through the Beatitudes at the end, it's the way of Jesus that brings blessing, right? It's the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven, the good road is the way of Jesus that brings flourishing and goodness to all. Sometimes we need a reminder of that, right? So as we sing this last song, I'm going to invite you all to stand and join me in singing a reminder to one another that the way of Jesus, that Christ goes with us wherever we go, sometimes in these ways we can't quite understand, but also sometimes in the eyes of the person beside you, sometimes in some really unsuspecting people beside you. So would you stand and let's sing this together as a way to remind each other that Christ goes with us wherever we are. Christ be with me, Christ before me, Christ behind me, Christ within me, Christ below me, Christ above me, Christ be with me. At my right hand, at my left hand, as I lie down, as I rise up, as I stumble, as I fall down, Christ, as I stand, Christ in the heart of everyone who thinks of me. Christ in the mouth of everyone who speaks of me. Christ in every eye that sees me, Christ in every ear that hears me. Amen. Amen.
Amen means, one of the things it means is may it be, and may it be, that we would have an awareness of Christ's presence with us. It's not that we need to try and convince Christ to be behind or before. Christ is. It's us being aware, and so may we be aware of that. You know, the things that we're talking about in this series are challenging things. It's one of the deep appreciations I have about this community is that we're willing to do that. We're willing to talk about things that we're not always looking for, like the difficult things to talk about. We're looking for the things that matter and that are relevant to our lives and that need to be talked about in order for this world to be a better place. I'm grateful for that, but it's hard. Some of this stuff is really hard. So we talked today about harm, people harming us. I thought maybe we would end by holding the other side. This is another thing about the branch I really appreciate is we try to hold both and. So we talked about people harming us. Let's end this morning by just naming some people who have been a blessing to us. And you could say them by name. We're going to do this out loud. Prepare yourselves. A bit of courage needed here. You could say their name, or you could just say my friend, my neighbor, my family member. If you want to say what they did or what was a gift, you could certainly name that too. Okay, so let's just have a handful of things here. Who has been a blessing to you? Not brought harm, but brought light to you. Tamber? Thanks. Isaiah, strong play, man. Made cookies for the family and for the neighbors. Beautiful. Yeah, the honesty of the kids that Bethany was with today, she led branch kids. Their honesty was a gift of life. Yep. What? Me? Oh, melt my heart. I'll tell you what. Thank you. We will tickle later as a reward.
I'll just collectively say this community, and I think our community at large over the last few weeks, just rallying around us, and phone calls, texts, meals, all of it. So.
Yeah, for all that Mike and Janelle and Lucy primarily have been through in the last few weeks in the supportive community. What a gift that's been. Yeah. That's not a bad one to end on. So friends, this week, may you be people who are a blessing, who bring light to the world, who make space for people to be honest about where they're at and what they're feeling, so that, in fact, this world would be a better place. Be those people this week. Amen. Thanks for being here. Good to see you.